Act 4, Scene 3. This takes place in England in the palace of King Edward. Um, the scene is long enough and it's made up of two elements. The first element is Malcolm and Macduff meeting, and both of them feeling, well, particularly Malcolm feeling that he cannot trust Macduff, and he puts him through quite a rigorous test of trust, because Malcolm, of course, feels like he cannot trust anybody at this moment in time. He's down in England trying to bolster the support of the King of England to try and get soldiers to go to Scotland, as is Macduff. Macduff has gone out in a huge limb as a patriot and has left his family exposed up in Scotland, and now comes to Malcolm, and initially Malcolm disappoints him, making him feel that he is not actually cut out for kingship, which is like a dagger in Macduff's heart. Later on in the scene, Macduff discovers what has happened to his family, and really, really importantly, there's a lot of language here as well that is useful for essays or exams on the reign of terror. Lots of personification and lots of reign of terror language. That's very important, so I'll note that as I go along. So firstly, it's Malcolm and Macduff. So Malcolm says, let us seek out some desolate shade, and there weep our sad bosoms empty. So let's get together and, like, cry our hearts out for Scotland. And Macduff says, let us rather hold fast the mortal sword, and like good men bestride our downfall birthdom. So no time for that. Let's get on with business. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven on the face. So I would be highlighting that for quotation there. Each new morn, new widows howl, new orphans cry, new sorrows strike heaven in the face. And it resounds as if it felt with Scotland and yelled out like syllable of dollar. So the dollar, or like the cries of lamentation. So Scotland is in a terrible state. Malcolm says, what I believe I'll wail, what no believe, and what I can redress, as I shall find the time to friend I will. What you have spoke, it may be so perchance, this tyrant, whose sole name blisters our tongues. Good quotation there as well. We don't even want to say his name. You'll recall a man that sat in the White House a while ago, and people by the end were refusing to enunciate his name, and we have a similar situation here. This tyrant, whose sole name blisters our tongue, was once thought honest. You have loved him well. He hath not touched you yet. I am young, but something you may discern of him through me, and wisdom to offer up a weak, poor, innocent lamb to appease an angry God. So here we have Malcolm testing Macduff. He's saying, weirdly, you've gotten away scot-free so far. You are, this tyrant whose name blisters our tongues has not touched you yet. And you have loved him well, as in you loved him in the past. And I am young. Maybe you have come here to sacrifice me to your angry God. Macduff says, I am not treacherous. But Malcolm continues to test him. But Macbeth is. A good and virtuous nature may recoil in an imperial charge, but I shall crave your pardon. That which you are, my thoughts cannot transpose, so I can't discern what you are. Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell, and that's a reference to the devil. The devil originally was an angel, and he was the brightest, and he fell to hell. He was a fallen angel. So what he's saying is, Macbeth fell, maybe you are a double agent too. So he's testing Macduff, and you can't blame him for testing him. They are living in an era steeped in paranoia, and Malcolm is the rightful heir to the throne. Though all things foul would wear the brows of grace, yet grace must still look so. Macduff says, I have lost all my hopes. I've come all the way down here, and now you're testing me, and maybe you're not fit to be king. I mean, it's too much from Macduff to bear. Malcolm says, perchance even there, where I did find my doubts, why in that rawness left you your wife and child, those precious motives, those strong knots of love, without leave taking. So Am I to believe that you would leave your family exposed in Scotland like that? You must be working for Macbeth. How else could you not? I pray you, let not my jealousies be your dishonours, but mine own safeties. You may rightly just whatever I shall think. And Macduff is devastated. He's saying, I mean, my poor country, bleed. So this is personification highlighting this quotation. Bleed, bleed, poor country. Great tyranny, lay thou basis sure. For goodness dare not check thee. Where thy wrongs, the title is afeard. Fare thee well, my lord. I would not be a villain, that thou would thinkest, and for the whole space that's in the tyrant's grasp, and the rich east to boot. So he's saying there at the end, for everything that's in the tyrant's grasp at the moment, i.e. all of Scotland, I wouldn't be on Macbeth's side. And even for the rich east to boot, so like all the tea in China, I wouldn't be in this tyrant's good graces. Now Malcolm just says, don't worry, I was just testing you. Be not offended. I speak not as in absolute fear of you. I think our country, highlight this quotation here, sinks beneath the yoke. Fantastic quotation. It doesn't need much explanation, just that it's sinking under the weight of this the yoke of the burden of this tyranny. It weeps, it bleeds. Brilliant personification there. Sometimes the smaller quotes are just as useful to sew into an essay. Personification of the country crying and weeping, and each day a new gash is added to her wounds. So every day another gash in the heart of Scotland. I think withal there would be hands uplifted in my right, and here from gracious England have I offer of goodly thousands. So look, I trust you, okay? I was just really trying to test you there. And I'm down here and I'm looking for help from gracious England, i.e. Edward. And I have thousands. But for all this, when I shall tread upon the tyrant's head or wear it on my sword, yet my poor country shall have more vices than it had before, more suffer and more sundry ways than ever by him that shall succeed. So again, he's sort of testing Macduff here in a new way. He's saying, yes, I'm down here and I'm getting help from the King of England in order to go up to Scotland and to take back my throne. But what if I am worse than Macbeth? What if I am a worse tyrant? Macduff asks, what should he be? Malcolm says, it is myself, I mean, in whom I know all the particulars of vice so grafted, that when they shall be opened, black Macbeth will seem as pure as snow. So he's saying, you ain't seen nothing yet. I'm actually worse than Macbeth. So he's testing Macduff again. And the poor state esteem him as a lamb, being compared with my confineless harms. So there's nothing I won't do. I could be far, far worse. And now, of course, Macduff is just despairing. Not in the legions of horrid hell can come a devil more damned in evils to top Macbeth. Nobody could be worse than Macbeth. And Malcolm says, I grant him bloody. Yeah, but apparently he's bloody. Luxurious, avaricious, false, deceitful, sudden, malicious, smacking of every sin that has a name. But there's no bottom, none, to my voluptuousness. Your wives, your daughters, your matrons and your maids could not fill up the cistern of my lust. So he's sort of being really seedy there and saying, I am a total philanderer and I would be lusty and lascivious if I was in charge of Scotland, and my desire all continent impediments would overbear, that did oppose my will. Better Macbeth than such a one to reign. So he's trying again to sort of test Macduff and to say, listen, it would be better to leave Macbeth on the throne than me. I mean, I could actually be far worse. I am far worse. I have a lusty appetite and I have a filthy nature. Macduff says, boundless intemperance in nature is a tyranny. It hath been the untimely emptying of the happy throne, the fall of many kings. But fear not yet to take upon you what is yours. You may convey your pleasures in spacious plenty, and yet seem cold. The time you may so hoodwink. You have willing dames enough. There cannot be that vulture in you to devour so many as will to greatness dedicate themselves, finding it so inclined. Look, you will have a limitless supply of ladies, etc., but you couldn't be as bad as Macbeth. Malcolm says, with this, there grows in my most ill-composed affection such a staunchless avarice, so agreed, that were I king, I should cut off the nobles from their lands, desire his jewels and his other houses, and mine more having would be a sauce to make hunger more, that I should forge quarrels unjust against the good and the loyal, destroying them for their wealth. So I would take the nobleman's land. I would act in a jealous way. I would be constantly greedy for more and for more. Macduff says, this avarice sticks deeper, grows with a more pernicious root than summer's seeming lust, and it hath been the sword of our slain kings. Yet do not fear, Scotland hath foisons to fill up your well of your mere own. All of these are portable, with other graces weighed. So Macduff, he's really like grasping at straws here, saying, oh, you can't be as bad as all that. There's plenty of everything for you in there. You just need to come back up to Scotland. You're the rightful successor. Malcolm says, but I have none. He's trying to say to him, I don't have the graces that would befit a king. And he's testing Macduff here, but it's painful to watch on the stage because Macduff has given up so much to come to England and to try and save Scotland. And this young man standing in front of him is testing him in every which way. Malcolm says, I have none. The king becoming graces. So these are important to know, the king becoming graces. So like the graces that, befit a good king, that befit his father before him. As justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, fortitude. I have no relish of them, but abound in the division of each several crime, acting in many ways. Nay, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity on earth. So he's saying, look, I was born without these king becoming graces, and I am sure that I would make things much, much worse were I to come to power. And poor Macduff now. He's done his best to try and coax the young fella into being the king he thinks he can be, and now he's just on the floor. Oh, Scotland, Scotland, Malcolm says, if such a one be fit to govern, speak. I am as I have spoken. And Macduff says, fit to govern? No, not even to live. And he said, you think you're fit to govern? You're not even fit to live. So he's raging with this young fella now that he won't assume his role that was literally deigned, given to him by his father, who represents God. O nation miserable, with that untitled tyrant, again, lovely phrasing there. They don't really call him by his name. They call him the untitled tyrant. Bloody sceptred, when shalt thou see thy wholesome days again? Since that the truest issue of thy throne by his own interdiction stands accursed and does blaspheme his breed. So now, Macduff, he's pulling out his hair. He's saying, poor bloody Scotland, even your own nominated successor is abandoning you. What is to become of you? It's deeply personal to Macduff, and of course lots of use of personification. Thy royal father was a most sainted king. So speaking of Scotland again in personification terms, your father was a sainted king. The queen that bore thee, oftener on her knees than on her feet, meaning constantly praying, died every day she lived. Fare thee well. These evils thou repeatest upon thyself have banished me from Scotland. O my breast, thy open ends here. So he's saying, I've done all this, I've come all this way, and I have pretty much banished myself from Scotland. I can't go back because obviously the tyrant is going to want to kill me. And I've done all of this to try and establish some help for the rightful King of England, or for the rightful King of Scotland. And here he is standing in front of me, a childish, lusty, pathetic, immoral creature. And Malcolm then says, "Ah, don't worry, I was only joking. I was only testing you. Macduff, this noble passion, child of integrity, hath from my soul wiped the black scruples, reconciled my thoughts to thy good truth and honour." So I just wanted to see what was truly, truly in your heart. I've been through a lot. I have cause not to trust people, and I was merely testing you. Devilish Macbeth, by many of these trains, hath sought to win me into his power, and modest wisdom plucks me from over-credulous haste. So what he means is, many people have tried to trick me before now. And, I was just trying to, with my modest wisdom, I was trying to not be overly credulous and to fall, into a trap with you as well. But God above, deal between thee and me, for even now I put myself in thy direction, and unspeak my own detraction. Here abjure the taints and blames I laid upon myself. So he's saying, I am none of those things. I am not lusty. I am not jealous. I am not greedy. I am none of those things. I was pretending to be those things to try and test you, to see if you would believe in me or not. But I am none of those things. So I unspeak those things that I said about myself, the taints and blames that I laid upon myself, for strangers to my nature. I am yet unknown to a woman, meaning I am still a virgin. I don't lust after women the way I said I do. And never was forsworn, scarcely have coveted what was mine own. At no time broke my faith, and would not betray the devil to his fellow. So none of those things that I said about myself were true. I would never covet anybody or anybody's things, hardly care for the things I own myself. My first false speaking was this upon myself: what I am truly is thine. So he's saying, what I really am is yours, and we can work together. And my poor countries to command, whither indeed before thy here approach. Old Sayward, with 10,000 warlike men already at a point. So, no, we can work together. I've spoken with the king, and the men are ready in Northumberland. Old Sayward with the 10,000 troops are ready, Northumberland on the border of Scotland, to invade and to stop this dictatorship. Already at a point, was setting forth. Now we'll together, and the chance of goodness be like our warranted quarrel. Well, why are you silent? And Macduff says, such welcome and unwelcome things at once. 'Tis hard to reconcile. So poor Macduff, he's exhausted, he's mentally drained, he's just been put through the ringer here by Malcolm at the very end, and like he really felt like he couldn't go on there for a moment. And now, of course, he's deeply relieved to see that Malcolm was only testing him. But his relief only lasts a moment, because enters a doctor. Malcolm says, well, more anon. Comes the king forth, I pray you? The doctor says, aye, sir. There are a crew of wretched souls that stay his cure. Their malady convinces the great assay of art. But at his touch, such sanctity hath heaven given his hand, they presently amend. Can you underline that? Make a note of that. I referred earlier, a couple of scenes ago, to Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet, and the fact that he has this kind of like godly connection to the natural world, and it brings him closer to God. He's really, really good with herbs, with flowers, with nature, and that's how he's able to make the vial for Juliet. And now we have this lovely little segment here which proves, now we never meet King Edward on the stage, but he is a valid king. If we're talking about the theme of kingship that runs through this play, he is a foil to Macbeth. He's he's the opposite of the tyrant, and he is quite aligned with the benign King Duncan. Very nice quotation here. There was a crew of wretched souls that were waiting for his cure. The malady or their sickness was convinced of his great art. But just by his touch, all he had to do, like the Pope or like Jesus in the Bible, all he had to do was put his hand upon them, and his sanctity that he has from heaven in his hand, and they were presently amended. They were fixed. They were cured. Okay, so that's very, very important. You don't need to have met the King of England. You need to be able to compare and contrast the kingships. And this is like the absolute antithesis of the kingship of Macbeth. It's life-giving as opposed to murdersome. And Malcolm says, I thank you, Doctor. Macduff, what disease does he mean? And Malcolm says, 'tis called the evil. A most miraculous work in this good king, underlining good king, and comparing to gracious King Duncan, which often, since my here remain in England, I have seen him do. So he regularly gives cures to people with like leprosy, or which is what they mean there, or diseases of that kind of like ilk. How he solicits heaven himself best knows, but strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks, put on holy prayers, and 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty he leaves the healing benediction. So further praise of Edward's healing hands and reference to him being a holy king and having like this holy channel to God, very similar to the holy channel to God that good King Duncan had. So in an essay on kingship, you would easily be able to compare these two kings, even though you don't meet this king. He's spoken about in very, very good terms. With this strange virtue, he hath a heavenly gift, underline that, the gift of prophecy, and sundry blessings hang about his throne that speak him full of grace. Lovely quotations there. He's full of grace, and heavenly graces hang about him. Enters Ross. Now, of course, Ross is coming from Scotland and will have tidings for for Macduff. So enters Ross. Macduff says, see who comes here, Malcolm asks. My countryman, yet I know him not. Macduff says, oh, my ever gentle cousin, come hither. And Malcolm says, oh, I know him now. Good God, betimes remove the means that make us strangers. Oh, I know who he is now. Please, in the future, we won't have to live like this and all be strangers to each other. Ross says, Sir, amen. And Macduff says, stand Scotland where it did, as in, is everything the same up there? Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself. It cannot be called our mother. Lovely quotation there. It cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing, but who knows nothing, is once seen to smile, where sighs and groans and shrieks that rend the air are made, not marked, where violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. So just underline that. So the norm is now violent crying and screaming. Violent sorrow seems a modern ecstasy. The dead man's knell is there scarce asked for who. So basically the bell of the funeral bell is it's barely even asked anymore who's being buried or who has died, because it has come to be so common. Is scarce asked for. And good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps, dying or ere they sicken. So men are dying or they get sickened. They sicken, they die. Oh, relation, this is Macduff asking, oh, relation, too nice and yet too true. It's nice to see you, but, Malcolm says, and what is the newest grief? And Ross says, that of an hour's age doth hiss the speaker, each minute teems a new one. So it's constant, it's over and over again, this killing. And how does my wife? Macduff asks. Why, well, Ross says. And all my children? Well, too. So Ross initially not telling the truth. Macduff says, the tyrant has not battered at their peace, so they haven't been disturbed or anything. No, they were well at peace when I did leave them. Macduff says, be not a niggard of your speech. How goes it? Don't hide anything from me. Tell me the exact truth. And Ross says, when I came hither to transport the tidings, which I have heavily borne, there ran a rumour of many worthy fellows that were out, which was to my belief witnessed, the rather for what I saw the tyrant's power afoot. Now is the time of help. Your eye in Scotland would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their distresses. So he's trying to bolster Macduff into fighting and getting ready to come back. Malcolm says, be their comfort, we are coming thither. So yeah, we're on our way. We've got it organised. We're on our way. Gracious England hath lent us good Sayward and 10,000 men, an older and a better soldier none that Christendom gives out. So Malcolm is explaining to Ross, never fear, we are organised now. We've got 10,000 men plus old Sayward, this Northumberland chief, who will help us to regain control of Scotland. And Ross says, would I could answer this comfort with the like, but I have words that would be howled out in the desert air, where hearing should not latch them. So I have something to say that I'd rather scream out in the desert so that nobody would actually hear me. And Macduff says, what concern they? The general cause? Or is it a fee grief due to some single breast? So is it a general thing, or will it affect one person's heart? Ross says, no mind that's honest, but in it shares some woe, though the main part pertains to you alone. So everybody will feel this pain, but specifically it applies to you. Macduff says, if it be mine, keep it not from me. Quickly, let me have it. So initially Ross was trying to keep the story from him. He didn't really know how to break the news that his wife and his children have been killed. Ross says, let not your ears despise my tongue forever, so please don't hate me for being the one to tell you this, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that e'er they ever heard. Macduff says, I guess at it. So he's guessing at what's coming next. Your castle, this is Ross, your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered, to relate the matter whereon the quarry of these murdered deer, to add the death of you. So your castle has been surprised, and your wife and children have all been killed. Malcolm says, merciful heaven, what man ne'er pull your hat upon your brows, give sorrow words, the grief that does not speak, whispers the overfraught heart and bids it break. So Malcolm having an obvious reaction to this, and Macduff saying, my children too? And Ross, wife, children, servants, all that could be found. And Macduff, and I must from thence my wife kill too? As I have said, Malcolm says to him, be comforted. Let us make medicines of our great revenge and cure this deadly grief. So get yourself together. We will go to Scotland and we will make a medicine of our revenge. But Macduff, of course, is reeling in shock. He's going to need a minute. Macduff, he has no children. All my pretty ones. Did you say all? Oh, hell kite, all? What? All of my pretty chickens and their dame, all in one fell swoop? So references to birds as well there, the idea of the hell kite. So again, this bird of prey swooping down and killing the little innocent chickens. Malcolm, rather, I suppose, insensitively here is saying, dispute it like a man, as in, take it like a man, get it together. Again, the theme of gender and a man's role, coming into play here. But poor Macduff, I mean, he needs a minute. He needs more than a minute, but he's not even being afforded a minute. I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things that were most precious to me, like nothing was ever so precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? So heaven looked on and didn't take their part in this, like nobody helped them. Sinful Macduff. He's talking there of himself. He sees himself as sinful for having left them in this vulnerable position to begin with. They were all struck for thee, nought that I am, nor for their demerits, but for mine, fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rests them now. So he's deeply ashamed that he left them so exposed to come to England to help Scotland. And Malcolm says, be this the whetstone of your sword, and let grief convert to anger. Blunt not the heart, enrage it. So he's saying, channel your anger, channel your grief into getting rid of this tyrant. And Macduff says, oh, I could play the woman with mine eyes. Again, reference to gender there. Crying is, of course, a woman's job. A man is not allowed to cry. And braggart with my tongue. But gentle heavens, cut short all intermission, front to front. Bring thou this fiend of Scotland. Lovely quote there, the fiend of Scotland. The fiend is, of course, a devil. And myself within my sword's length set him. If he escape, heaven forgive him too. So he's resolved there to going to Scotland to get now his own personal revenge. Before this, it was a patriotic duty he felt to come to England and to bolster this support for Scotland. But now it's a specific personal revenge he's requiring. And Malcolm says, this time goes manly. Come, go we to the king. Our power is ready. Our lack is nothing but our leave. So we're ready. We have the power, we have the army, we have the will. Macbeth is ripe for shaking. And the powers above put on their instruments. Receive what cheer you may. The night is long that never finds the day. So a reference there to heaven as well, like the above looking down and cheering the way. So they feel that God is, on their side. A huge scene, a very, very long scene, a very arduous scene to play on the stage, I assume. First and foremost, Malcolm testing Macduff, an exasperated, exhausted Macduff. First of all, not believing him, and then saying, well, even if you are on the level and you are here to help Scotland, I'm not your guy. I'm just weak and I'm not able. Now, I didn't say it at the time, but it is important to kind of to really note and to take time to look at this. Malcolm is already depicting a lot more of the king becoming graces than his father before him. He has grown up overnight because of what's happened, and he is proving himself, and he is able to say very unequivocally that he can see, or he can test people when they're being two-faced, and that is something his own father before him was not able to do. Remember, he says of the initial Thane of Cawdor, he was a man on whom I built an absolute trust. There's no art to find man's construction in the face. So what Duncan was saying was, I wasn't able to tell when someone was being two-faced, where his young son, a very young son, is able to do that, is able to test people. So this gives us the impression that should Malcolm be throned, and should order be restored in Scotland, that he will be a very, very, very strong king. So that's the first part of the scene. It's very, very long. It's extremely difficult to kind of contain and really convey everything that's being said there. Then we have the next part where Ross comes to deliver the news to Macduff, and Macduff is devastated that he has abandon his wife and his children to this horrendous fate. And the very important part there in the middle as well about the king becoming graces of the King of England and the brilliant kind of attention that he has with nature, and this is seen as holy. So so far you've seen three kings: Duncan, Macbeth and even though you haven't met Edward, you can speak fluidly about his goodness and the fact that he is affording 10,000 men to Scotland. So the scene ends with the men bolstered and ready to go back to Scotland to take Scotland back from the tyrant. Now, whether they can do it or not, considering the apparitions that say very clearly, none of woman born can harm Macbeth, whether they can do it or not will be revealed in Act 5.